Okay, that's also. Let's draw a line under that for all you folks watching at home, and move on to the next, probably a little bit lighter topic, and a slightly more, a topic a little bit more dear to my heart, which is Bayern no longer winning everything, or at least looking like they're faltering. Although never count them out, but they are no longer Tabellenführer, as we say in Germany, which means the table leaders. They have been...
Love to get that word Führer in anyway.
That's right. I actually was quite surprised when I first moved to Germany that was still in active use. It just means leader. And I was like...
Love that word, Führerschein. I don't like sporting, fandom based on Schadenfreude, based on wanting to see a team fail. But I'm just tired. Oh, well, Mourinho, of course. But I'm just tired of the Bayern dominance, and it's one of those things that really curbs the interest in the league for me. And I know for people I speak to German friends of mine who've grown up here and they don't think of it that way. It's a real win for them if they qualify for Champions League, and they like that Bayern's strong because that means the German team is usually strong because they're always the nuts and bolts of the German team. But I don't feel that way. I don't want. I want to see someone else up there, even if it's somebody like even a Schalke. It's pretty terrible.
As a Dortmund fan, you would.
I would much rather see Bayern win than Schalke, but sometimes like last year, they did play each other at one point, and I was, when Schalke was doing pretty well.
There was at least a silver lining for you. No.
They lost to Berlin this weekend, and they lost 2-0 and didn't really look like they were going to win. It wasn't a close run thing. And then...
Did you catch some parts of the game?
Yeah, I did. I went along to a friend of mine was in town, and I went along to a notorious Hertha Berlin pub near my place. I kind of came in there, and I saw another guy that I know, and I said, "Are you a Hertha fan?" He's like, "No, just anyone against Bayern." So I'm like, "All right." And it was a great atmosphere. And then the next day, Dortmund goes 2-0 down. I'm like, all right, well, they've lost their chance. And then they came back to win 4-2, which is pretty impressive. So
I think mentally that also says a lot. But let's stay with Bayern for a second. I think it's quite interesting just how, like, this specific moment, let's deconstruct it a little bit. Robben and Ribéry are past their peak. They've sold Costa, who could have been a natural replacement for one of those two on either side. They sold Vidal, who is an important player for them.
I didn't understand the Vidal sale at all. That made no sense to me whatsoever.
Müller and Boateng are shadows of the players they've been over the past couple of years, or a couple of years ago. And they also have a new manager. And the question is, number one, has Niko Kovac drank from a poison chalice and taken the job at this particular time? And second, how much time will he get?
Yeah, I really liked the Kovac signing. I liked that they hadn't just gone with another one of these big world managers who seem to just get, they rotate seats at the top clubs. And they went with a really promising young German manager, and I thought that was really cool. I mean, it's of course still the Bayern thing of weakening a rival who they lost to in the DFB final, German Cup final, but I liked it, and I hope that they do give him time, because I think he is a good manager, and I think that he's inherited a squad. It's really a lot like the Manchester United Ferguson thing from a few years ago when he retired, they won the league, everyone thanked him for his amazing contribution, 13 titles, which is unbelievable. But he also realized that the core of the team that he'd had that whole time, Giggs and, the Scholes and stuff, they were retired.
It's a generational turnover. Yeah.
Going to have to completely rebuild that team, and he knew that. And I think that's what's going to happen to Bayern. I think they'll still win the Bundesliga more often than not, just because of the wealth and the power that they have. But if they really want to be one of the best in Europe, they've got to rebuild that team.
I think that's a fantastic analogy. I mean, maybe we could follow that a bit and see where it goes. For me, it's there were other teams in the Premier League that were at United's heels and just, ready for them to slip up. And United didn't handle that transition very well. Number one, I think there were a lot of cultural issues. There was a lot of bias in the selection of David Moyes. Ferguson being a Scot, Moyes being a Scot, and just not being prepared. Also, it coincided with Manchester United getting a new CEO. And the CEOs are really the guys with the address books, and they can bring up the directors of football or the CEOs of other European clubs and make sales go through for player transfers. And so that was also really difficult. But in the case of the Bundesliga, Bayern don't really have these teams that are nipping at their heels and just absolutely ready that once they slip up and have maybe a bad start to the season or a bad season, that there's a new sheriff in town. Man City were absolutely ready to take advantage of that power vacuum, to some extent Chelsea as well, and they'd been preparing for years and years and years. There's really, there's no force in the Bundesliga. Maybe you see some of it with Dortmund, but they're so inconsistent. Maybe you see a little bit of it with RB Leipzig, but it's still early days. And I think, who else in there? Maybe Leverkusen?
Yeah, and none of these teams can keep their star players for long enough to really get a good team together. Dortmund and Leipzig were the only ones that could, but still if a big club comes knocking, then they won't be able to. It could be a really exciting time. I think Dortmund have a great young team, and Red Bull have they've no need for money. They've no need for selling their players, really. So it could be a really good time for the other teams in the German league, but there's not the same level of competition as there would be when Ferguson left Man United. I really liked the Moyes signing. I thought it was good, and it was something that a big club wouldn't do, like a stereotypical big club. I liked that they gave someone a chance, but then they stuck with him for not very long at all, and they're still kind of trying to find that instant fix to get them back to where they were.
I mean, I think that if I were in charge of Manchester United, I would have found a trusted hand to manage that transition, maybe for a 2-3 year contract for Ancelotti or maybe even Louis van Gaal earlier, and then find somebody who's really long term who can grow with the club once other things are stable. And I think in hindsight, although I wasn't super happy about the Unai Emery signing for Arsenal, I think that's exactly what they did, and that's a low risk option. And so at least you don't run the risk of going backwards. But I won't go too much into that. But how much time do you think Kovac will get? How many more? What do you think they need to do to course correct, and how much time do you think they'll get?
I think they'll definitely give him a year. I would say they'd give him a year, unless he really starts to go into free fall, which I can't imagine happening just with the amount of quality that they have. I don't imagine that they would drop as many points as they have in the last week, and I think Bayern is still a really well-run club. That's one of the other reasons why Germans don't get up in arms about Bayern's dominance is just purely that they are really well run. They don't spend crazy amounts of money on players. They recruit very well. It's the reason that they're at the top isn't because they've been taken over by someone with a lot of money. It's because they've built themselves up to be the biggest team in German football and one of the biggest in the world, and taken advantage of different, the quality of German youngsters and German football talent, and stereotypically based themselves around German players as opposed to English clubs, which don't really do that. So I think they're still relatively patient, but yeah, so if they finish second or third this year, I don't think he's going to get the sack immediately. If they come out of the Champions League really early, then he could be in trouble, I would say.
I wanted to talk about Alphonso Davies, which I think is really interesting, that they are bringing over this young Canadian player, and maybe we do a separate segment on Bayern's track record developing younger players and bringing them through, because they do tend to buy a lot. But let's do a separate segment on this. I want to talk about Dortmund because we only have a few minutes left. They're now at the top of the table. They showed a lot of resolve to come back from 2-0 down against what I think are one of the top sides in the Bundesliga. We were just talking earlier about how smooth Kai Havertz looks. Like they're talking about him being filling the spot that Mesut Ozil has left open, and I didn't really know much about him, and I was skeptical, but I see some green shoots there. He's a really smooth player, and really enjoys setting up other players and finding that killer pass. And then also Julian Brandt, I thought during this failed 2018 World Cup campaign, he was their best player, and I could not understand why he didn't start after his performances off the bench. Like playing Leon Goretzka on the right instead of Julian Brandt starting when he was the most energetic and dynamic and direct player they had. I mean, I also thought he played pretty well in the Dortmund game, and so, but also on the same side, it seems like Dortmund's quality was just too strong for them, and their mentality most importantly.
Yeah, I really was surprised that they would come back. I thought that because they're so young, and there's still this kind of fragility about them. And, with a new coach who's still trying things out, he's changing the lineups and that kind of thing, trying to work out who's the best fit. So I was pretty surprised. But I watched that game and I watched the 7-0 against Nuremberg, and it was just, the amount of attacking talent that they have there. Especially with Paco Alcácer. I was trying to work out how to say it properly.
I think we need to take some Spanish lessons. Yeah, well, Paco Alcácer. You need to get that little lisp down. With him there, because they didn't really have a striker, I think they really, really could be on the cusp of something if they can keep that team together. Jadon Sancho is unbelievable. He's played so well, and I don't know that there is this danger that a lot of these young English guys who are coming to the Bundesliga are thinking of it as a stepping stone, But if they could somehow keep him around a bit longer. It's happened with Pulisic. I think Pulisic is probably there for the long run. He's not looking to jump to a big club before. At least in the next couple of seasons, yeah.
Yeah, I think he's got a good head on his shoulders, and if they could, Sancho and Royce have got this understanding already, which is pretty amazing. And I think Favre is known for bringing through young players as well. He basically brought Marco Reus through at Mönchengladbach, and so I think it could be really good for them if they can keep it together.
I how they say when you have a hammer, everything starts looking like a nail. So my hammer is Arsenal and Arsene Wenger, and actually when Lucien Favre and Arsene Wenger have quite a relationship. Granit Xhaka was actually recommended to Wenger by Favre, and they're both Frenchmen, so they have a pretty good. They have a history, I think, but it's quite interesting what the parallels are. Wenger has also given a lot of young players breakthroughs. They both play an extremely attacking game, where actually and a lot of defensive frailties, a lot of defensive errors, a lot of defensive weaknesses, and they really over rely on their attacking qualities to get them out of jail. And the thing is, there's only so many times in a season where you can pull that card and expect it to work. It reminds me a lot of Arsenal. Like there were some games we would win like 5-1, just blowing teams out of the water. And then there would be some games where we just like capitulate and lose like 3 or 4-0 because we're so open at the back. And I see some parallels there.
Yeah, the second goal that Leverkusen scored was amateur.
It was a comedy of errors, just like the ball pinging around the box, like
looking at it, not trying to clear it. And Dortmund's defense hasn't been good since Hummels left. I mean, he was really the main man there, keeping it together. And they've brought through a lot of different defenders recently. And they had that generational thing, that great Dortmund team. A lot of those guys are in their early 30s, and they've since moved on. So I don't know Favre's strengths as a defensive coach, but he will need to do better, because you can't just rely on scoring 4 goals every week.
Well, any last comments?
I wanted to know what you thought about Peter Cech saying that Arsene Wenger cared more about style than winning, but we don't have to do that today.
I mean, I think that's definitely something we should talk about more in a different segment. But I think that I think if your heroes stay around long enough, they end up becoming your villains. And in some ways, I think it's natural for there to be some turnover in a club, because new ideas don't always stay new, especially over 22 years, and you can't always expect old dogs to keep learning new tricks. So I think as much as I resisted it at the end of last season, I think it was probably the right thing. But it's also something. We talked shortly about this. Maybe we'd also talk about this in a different episode. But I think that there's a certain dogma that goes along with being a football fan. Like, I don't want to support a team that completely changes their style of play every time there's manager turnover. And so, to me, it's very important to me that Arsenal play in an attacking way. Like, if they started playing like Mourinho's teams do, then I would hate it. My camera just pooped out.
All right.
But
well, it's as good a time as any to end it. But
yeah.
Cool. All right. Thanks very much, everybody.
Yeah.
Tune in next time for Yankees BFC. We might have a different name as well. That's something we're discussing.
I mean, we've just been overwhelmed by all the comments that you guys have left in YouTube.
Feedback. We're taking it on board. So
like drop a comment, like even one comment from everybody would be cool. Just drop a comment, like if you have any ideas for names or any other feedback, we'd love to have it. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in for episode 6, and we will see you next week.
See you next week.
Ciao.